Welcome to the Open Word, an online ministry of Boone Open Bible Church. On today's program, we bring you A Word from the Pastor, featuring Phil Waldo. And now, here's Phil.
Hey everybody, Pastor Phil here. I recently finished a series of talks about God's voice based on Psalm 29, which describes how powerful and profound it is to hear. In this series, I'd like to dive into some practical ideas on how we can actually tune in to God's voice. I mean, really knowing when we've heard from God. And let me give you an example. When I was a junior at Bible College in Des Moines, I was informed that I would have to move to Oregon to finish my degree, since the two colleges were merging into one on the West Coast. I had been very active in the music programs, and my music director was also moving to Oregon. Months before we made the move, she asked me to consider attending a particular church in Eugene where she would be directing the choir and would like me and a few others to be a part of that. Well, time passed, and later that year at the new school, my music director mentioned that the church where she was attending had just asked her to direct their choir. Ding, ding, ding. I remembered our conversation from months earlier, and I asked her about that. You told me last spring that you would be directing their choir, but they just now asked you to do that? And she replied, yes, the Lord showed me that back in the spring. Wow. Now that's being tuned into God's voice. I want to learn to hear Him with that kind of detail and accuracy. But let me be clear. God is sovereign and can speak to whomever He pleases in any way He chooses, and neither you nor I can manipulate God to speak to us. However, I do believe we often miss God's voice because we haven't learned how to tune in. I'm reminded of Samuel's experience in 1 Samuel chapter 3. He was just a boy when the Lord spoke to him. He heard God's voice, but he didn't recognize it. So he went to Eli thinking that he must have called out to him. Now after this happened 3 times, Eli realized it was God speaking to the boy and explained to Samuel how to listen. And Samuel did so. He heard the voice of the Lord and went on to become one of the most notable of God's prophets. I believe we can learn to recognize God's voice too. Now I'll be the first to admit that I have not mastered this. But the scriptures give us some clues on how to strengthen our antenna to better tune in to God's voice. We will explore this together in the weeks to come. And that's it for today. See you next time.